12:05 in the afternoon here on the Talk to Me Network. Helping Seniors of Brevard is ready to get underway. And your host and executive director of Helping Seniors of Brevard, Kerry Fink, is here to take things over. Kerry, we were kind of playing Name That Tune a little bit before we went on the air.
Yes.
And I thought of another one for my name, and that was back in the 60s, a woman named Joni Summers and Johnny Get Angry.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Well, there's another tune by Men at Work. It came out in the 80s, and it was called Johnny Be Good.
That's right. Oh, yeah.
Well, actually, it was Chuck Berry, but it was a different song. There were two different versions of the same song. But there you go. So Johnny Be Good. Yeah. Right. Okay.
So,
well,
unless we got another song, let's go.
We can keep this in a musical vein because I can't wait to introduce our guest, which started this whole conversation. Her name is Corina Savela, and we were talking about it. Reminded us of the '60s song. We were looking it up. Ray Peterson did it, called Corina. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start by welcoming us all to our lunchtime gathering, 12 noon, right here on every Wednesday. 90.3 FM WEJF. And if you're listening to us online at WEJF.net, thank you for doing so. And also welcome to those of you who catch this as a worldwide podcast, because every place that you find podcasts, whether it's Apple, iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Amazon podcast, wherever you find a podcast, you'll find Helping Seniors Radio there. You'll find us on the YouTube podcast channel. You'll find us on our own YouTube channel for Helping Seniors of Brevard. You'll find us on a Facebook page for Helping Seniors of Brevard. And you'll find us actually on our own website, helpingseniorsofbrevard.org. Why am I saying all that? Because a lot of times when we have these conversations on the radio, we appreciate everybody listening to the conversation live, but we also understand that many people catch this as a podcast later or come back and find it when they need some help. And today's topic about total long-term care solutions is going to be something that many people are probably going to be looking for at certain periods of time. And we've discovered that people will either look for it when it's relevant to them, or occasionally they'll say, this is a great show because my friend Bob is going through this in their family, and he might benefit from hearing this information. And so thank you for joining us on the radio today, however you're catching the broadcast. And I want to introduce to you somebody. First of all, we're going to come back to Corina in just a second, but I do want to introduce somebody who's been bedrock to the Helping Seniors organization, kind of like you, John Harper, who is, we were just talking about the fact that you were part of Helping Seniors going all the way back when Joe established it, and even before that, you were helping Joe when Joe was doing the Brevard Alzheimer's Foundation. You got Joe started on radio, and the radio conversation has become a tradition of helping seniors and their families get this information all along. But very similar to that, somebody who's very good about getting information in the hands of seniors and their families is none other than our very own Karen Wernlund, who really keeps the office humming and volunteers and just really helps us organize everything. So when you're calling the Senior Information Helpline, that free call at 321-473-7770, you're going to talk to Karen or one of her excellently trained people who volunteer to help us, which includes Corina. But welcome, Karen. How are you today?
Thank you so much for having me here today, Kerry. It's my pleasure, as always.
This is going to be such a good conversation because not only you volunteer your time on our Helping Seniors board. Thank you very much. You also keep the office humming. It's never been in better shape than it is these days, and you're really getting the volunteer program rolling, and we're really starting to get ahead on some of the things. Because last year we took well over 5,000, I think it was 5,400 plus calls from seniors and their families trying to solve things. And so it's a big job for a little nonprofit called Helping Seniors, and you make it look easy, although I know absolutely that it's not. And one of the big tasks that you've had this year is you've really been working on what we call the resource book, because we talked about that it's so important. This is like foundational to the organization, that if we don't know who to refer people to, we can't be as effective as we would like to, Karen.
And as a matter of fact, that actually brings in long-term care because the question of the month or the flavor of the month has been a question that I've not gotten in a year and a half, and I've gotten it over and over this month. People want to know where they can go for memory testing, and they also are wanting so much more information. So caregivers are wanting so much more information about Alzheimer's, about dementia, about those things that do take long-term care eventually to take care of your loved one. So it's as a matter of fact, today I was out on the internet trying to find places where you can have your memory tested.
Wow. And not only that, Karen, your own background is that you have a successful company called Emerald Care Management where you yourself do care management. So you understand it from the inside out. And we were talking about the fact that, like most of us, it started inside your family. You were a caregiver, and that kind of gave you the passion for making sure that we're helping seniors as we go along here.
Yes, it was my father. I cared for him for 8 years. And most of them were golden. A couple of them were pretty rough, but
wow,
as time goes on, events happen and situations happen. But it always boiled down to he had somebody in his corner. He had somebody to back him up. And as I go through this year and a half that I've been answering the phones for helping seniors of Brevard, it breaks my heart over and over and over again, the amount of seniors that don't have anyone in their corner to even ask the first question. And by the time that senior gets to one of our call takers, they don't always even know what question to ask.
Yeah, that's so important. And as we're going to dive into this conversation, I also wanted to bring out one other thing is I think you also specifically went back to school so that you could work on, and this was interesting because this proves you're never too old to do something if God gives you I got to go do this, and you did it, but you went back to school and you got your bachelor's in psychology. Talk about that because that's very important in all the things that we try to do in the helping seniors world too.
So in 2018, it was a monumental year for me. I did graduate from college, but in June of that year, I had my right hip replaced.
Oh, my goodness.
And my large goal was, at the age of 65, to walk across the stage and get the diploma.
Wow.
So that I didn't have to use my walker or a cane. So it was a tough battle. I couldn't get myself off the cane. I finally threw it in my trunk and said, "Fall if you must."
Oh,
so the moral of the story is I walked across, I got my diploma. I just think that one thing that young people today don't understand is no matter what kind of a business or feature that you get into, having your bachelor's degree, having your master's degree, going on to college opens more doors than you'll ever know.
Yeah, that's good advice. Well, let's kind of roll open the conversation we're going to have. I want to introduce our guest, Corina Savela with Total Long-Term Care Consultants. And I want to kind of walk us. First of all, welcome, Corina. How are you today?
Thank you. I appreciate being here.
I'm so glad you're here. I was thinking back to the days when, I was talking earlier about how John Harper got Joe established on radio. And then there's a funny story about how Dr. Lee Sheldon, who is on our board to this day, got Joe started in television too. But one of the very first TV shows that we ever did in helping seniors, we're now here working into our 15th year of serving Brevard County, but one of the very first TV shows that Joe did, and at that time, I didn't know much about this, not like I know a lot about it now, but we were just really helping Joe technically get the TV filmed, and he brought in a guest named Karen Wernlund, and Kathy she actually has the company that you guys work together in, the Total Long-Term Care Consultants. And it was fascinating because just her breadth of experience and the way she explained some of the things that we run into with aging and why we need to help. We've coined this phrase, it takes a village to raise a kid, but really that's so true with seniors. And then come to find out, we all get reconnected some years later, and Kathy still has this company after all of her experience with being executive director for large skilled nursing facilities. She has all that in her background. In fact, recently, Karen and I had a meeting, and we were talking about all the things that happen on the front of how important it is to try to figure out this. I call it kind of like a matrix of care for seniors, and both you and her have volunteered your time to help us kind of build that matrix out.
Thank you for mentioning that. I was about to say that.
Yeah. So, Corina, I wanted to ask you, because it was funny. We were talking before the radio. I want you to share the story, because everybody has a unique way of coming into being concerned about seniors. And I loved how you explained that you met Kathy like literally 20 some odd years ago.
Yes, I've always had a heart for seniors. Even as a child, I gravitated to grandparents and the whatnot rather than playing with the other kids. So I've always had that passion and served my community, neighborhood, etc. And I was helping my neighbors who were elderly and had some issues, and Kathy was called in on that job. So we met back in 2004.
Wow.
And so I realized, oh, wow, this is very interesting. And I worked with her in that situation. So that's how we met.
But you, just like Karen, you have just this broad level of experience in so many areas. Because the other thing that you have in your basket of things that you know how to help people with, as we were talking about, you are also kind of like a Medicare expert, and that's a big part of what you're able to do is help people navigate. And here we are in the middle of that season where your mailbox gets plumb full of things, and you're getting all these famous TV people telling you, I can help you with your Medicare, just call 1-800, whatever the number is. And yet this is something you do, but I always talk to people how important it is to find somebody local that you can trust who knows our area, because when you respond to an ad or an 800 number that came in the mail, you're talking to a call center, and they're going to sit in Omaha and tell you how to find a doctor in Satellite Beach. I don't know,
Yes. I think there's a real disservice to the senior population during this enrollment time with all the marketing and advertising. I am an insurance agent, and I believe that having a local agent, someone that can sit with you, talk with you, find out your real needs. I mean, your insurance agent should do a needs assessment, and then they should be there for you. And they should know the doctors and local communities that you're going to get your services in.
Yeah,
So,
I love that term, needs assessment, and I have a feeling we're going to talk a little bit more about that as we move into care management, because we have talked so often. Joe Steckler, who's he's actually president emeritus, chairperson emeritus, whatever the right thing is. He's on our board of directors still. Joe is 90, working on 91, and there's not a day that he's not trying to write an article or get some information out that's going to benefit seniors and his families. But one of the things he's always talked about ever since the day I met him was we got to all have our own aging plan, which is a roadmap to the things we might find ourselves navigating as the years come along. And I always kind of bring it back to, well, we understand hurricane plan living in Florida. We don't want a storm. We just want to be ready for it. And in that aging plan, we've come up, we call it getting your ducks in a row, just to find a little bit of a lighter way, because aging plan sounds like I have to write a theme paper or something. But really what we're trying to do is get people to think through things, because you can do so much more when you have a plan than you can if you're just reacting to whatever life is throwing at you. But we've come up with two corollaries, and I think this is going to jump us into this conversation. One is we say, don't try this on your own. We think we can be clever, and we can go do an internet search, and we think we can maybe try to roadmap these things on our own. But I don't know about you, but sometimes I'll go off on a tangent and try to search something on the internet, wind up more conflicted than I started, because you're not sure if what you're reading is accurate. You're not sure if it's current, and you're not even sure if it's local. Like, particularly if you're trying to research like a legal question, attorneys are going to pop up from the state of Washington, which may or may not have bearing on Florida law and things like that. So I was thinking, like, you have to. Don't try this on your own. Find somebody that you can trust who's local, who can help you navigate this. And that is so important. And in particular, as we launch into the conversation about long-term care, it seems to me like, when we're confronted with the things that happen with aging, we need the wisdom of experience, somebody who's been down this road before to help navigate us. And Corina, I wanted to kind of ask you about that, and both of you guys, just to open up the conversation. As care managers, I don't want to overlook the obvious. What are the things that you do that helps families as we age? Corina, let me start with you on that.
Well, first, I'd like to address the negative connotation of having the words aging plan.
Okay.
We plan for everything.
Sure.
The birth of a child.
Right.
Setting that child's educational goals, whether they're going to go to preschool or they're going to be homeschooled, they're going to go to college or trade school, and then they're going to be on their own. Then there's plans for your career.
Right.
These are all positive things. Are we going to buy a house? We make a plan.
Yes.
We're going to retire. We're going to make a plan. Getting ready for the empty nest. All these things we think of are positive plans.
Right.
Well, an aging plan is also positive. It doesn't have to be negative.
Thank you.
Negativity doesn't apply in this situation.
Right.
And most people have that negative connotation. We're all aging. You can't get out of that situation. I've met a number of clients who think they are the only 90-year-old who isn't aging and can do everything they could do at 25. It's not true. We're all going to age, and an aging plan shouldn't be negative. It should be a positive. A hurricane plan you think of as a negative thing, but again, it should be positive.
Right.
Because you're preparing yourself so that if something happens, it won't be as severe.
Correct.
You're buffering the impact of whatever the issue is going to be.
Well said. Yeah. So Karen, as you think about, these conversations, because as a care manager, I always tell the story, like the first time I ever heard of a case manager was when my mom was in the hospital and she was going to be discharged, and a case manager walks in and says, "You got to tell me where your mom's going for rehab afterwards." And I had no bearing or no understanding of even what that meant, let alone how to pick a place. And I'm asking that person, "Well, which place should I choose?" And they said, "We by law can't tell you." So they basically said, "You can start to look at the star ratings and figure out what's close, but that's all I can tell you." Because in that role of a hospital kind of case manager, there was a specific role. The lady was trying to be helpful, but she was being as helpful as she could within the confines of a role. But what you're able to do, Karen, is step in. It's a whole different world. Talk about that a little bit.
So basically, when I'm doing Emerald Care, my whole goal is to keep the client as independent as possible in their own home. And if there does have to be options made, possible living, possible rehabilitation, then I'm happy to take my client to 5 different rehabilitation places and let them pick the one, because just because one is good for this client, the one down the street is maybe better for the next client. So it's like picking a house. It's like picking a doctor. You have to pick for the person who is going to be attending. The physical therapy is very, very much that way. Mm-hmm. A lot of people, they do great with their physical therapy mm-hmm. because they love their physical therapist. There's people who just don't care for it, and in being a care manager, it would be part of my responsibility to say, "John, I don't think you like this person as well as you should. They have plenty of other people on staff. Let's just see who else is available." That would be to give him an option, to keep him going, to keep him more involved so that he is able to go back, or she is able to go back and live in their home independently. So that's always been my goal with Emerald Care, is to keep the independence going.
Yeah, Corina, I was thinking about this. This is where I think experience matters, right? Because if you stepped on board an aircraft and you were going to fly up, I don't know, I'm just making this up to Chicago or something, and the pilot comes on and says, "Well, this is going to be my first flight. I've never really done this before, but we're going to be fine." That wouldn't instill a whole lot of confidence. But if the person came on and said, "Listen, we've been doing this for, I'm celebrating 50 years of flying," or whatever, you value that experience. And I think that's the point I'm trying to bring across. Like when you talk to Karen or you talk to Corina at Total Long-Term Care Consultants, this isn't your first flight. You've done this a few times, and when certain things come up, how to help navigate that.
Yes, having a local care manager is important because they know the community. They know the people who work in the various fields. You know the rehab facilities, you know the nursing homes, you know the assisted livings, you know the dentists, you know the neurologists, you know the resources that are available, and you can you do a needs assessment with a client. Depending on what they're hiring you for. I mean, sometimes it's, I need an aging plan. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's, my mom broke a hip, or I broke a hip. Mm-hmm. I have no family. I need to go to rehab. What do I do? How do I choose? So you interview them and you determine as quickly as you can their personality, their needs, their insurance, their finances, their life, and where they are, and then you try to give them options. You know, I always try to give options as to here are the 3 that are going to be the best fit for you, because each one is unique, and you have to map. Like Karen said, you know, some people like a more rigid environment, and that's where they thrive in terms of therapy. Other people are more laid back, like, I want to do it this way or that way. And there are facilities that go both ways, but they both get the job done. So you want to put somebody, help them find the facility that's going to work best for them.
No, it makes perfect sense. You know, I was thinking as you were going through that explanation of knowing the right people to call and to match the correct answer to the particular situation that you're trying to resolve, it reminds me of the fact that in the old days, we used to call it, you know, find somebody with a good Rolodex, because they'll know who to call. But now I guess we call it our contact list. But this is the point. You guys know who provides care with excellence. And so as you're trying to help navigate this for somebody, you really have not only the wisdom to understand the overarching situation, but also what are good solutions given whatever it is we're facing.
Personality is a big part of it. An 80-year-old, 85-year-old, 90-year-old, 72-year-old is not going to change fundamentally. They have a personality. As a psych major in social work, you understand that. We are who we are. We're people, and we're not going to change that much. We may change a little bit. So you have to work within the confines, and different businesses are able to do that.
Yeah.
I do have a question for you. Do you find when you get clients that when they first come to you, they really don't know what they want or need?
Oh, I'm going to jump in and say this is where exactly we're going to pick up on the second half of the show, because I want to get into when do you make that decision to get a care manager and how's it work? We're talking with Corina Savela with Total Long-Term Care Consultants and Karen Wernlund with Emerald Care Management, who also sits on our board with Helping Seniors and actually runs Joe's Senior Resource Center. More, stay tuned.
And welcome back to the second half of Helping Seniors of Brevard. I'm John Harper. Kerry Fink, both Karen and Corina were swinging and swaying there a little bit.
Really?
So let's get things going here with the second half of the show. First half, very interesting, and let's carry on the conversation.
Yeah, thank you, John Harper. Again, welcome back on 90.3 FM, WEJF Radio, and if you're listening online at WEJF.net, and if you're continuing to listen on podcast, we appreciate it. And a lot of people do that because maybe they were in their car and they missed some of the conversation in the first half, and so then they are able to go back and pick that up in the podcast. But we're having a great conversation with Karen Wernlund, who is not only a board member with Helping Seniors, she has her own company called Emerald Care Management, but she also runs the operation there at Joe's Senior Resource Center, which is that beautiful facility that Dr. Craig Delegdish and the Omni Healthcare Group have made available to us. They've given us a great portion of the second floor of that beautiful Omni Healthcare building right there on the medical campus downtown Melbourne, just a block or two from the hospital. And welcome back, Karen.
Thank you so much.
And also...
Sure.
And also, yeah, thank you, Karen. And also Corina Savela, who not only is with Total Long-Term Care Consultants, but also is an expert at Medicare insurance and things related to that, and then also volunteers her time with us on the Helping Seniors world. And I guess the conversation that we were just going to launch into ahead of the break was to talk a little bit, because I want to know how we get the help that we need through a care manager, and how you can best help us. So maybe we just dive right in there. And Karen, maybe you want to re-ask the question we were asking.
I do, because I find so many times when I first meet a client and that first time that get to know each other, they don't have any idea of what they necessarily need. So it's really more of they found the courage to reach out, yet they don't know what they're reaching out for. Do you find that with your clients, your new clients?
Yes, a lot of times people just don't know what they need. And a lot of times when they do reach out, it's because they've had help, but it wasn't the help that they needed. They found help on the internet. Kerry says there's a lot out there on the internet, and you can search and find, and it works, and it's great. But sometimes you come across something, or someone will refer you to something, and it's helpful, but it isn't your number one need. And then you spend money and time on these services, which are, they're definitely helping, but they weren't your number one problem. And then the problem continues and grows until you get somebody in to identify the real issue.
Well, isn't that the value of getting expert help? Because what you're really doing, my father had this saying, he said, you have to find the right tool for the job. So if you're trying to take a screwdriver and bang a nail in, it might work, but you're probably going to bend the nail and it's not going to be the right tool. You want to get the hammer that can drive that nail straight and true. But isn't that what we're really talking about here too? You want to get the help that's going to help you resolve this, because you're in like uncharted land and you don't really know where you're going. I'm going to take us back to the situation. And I found, like, I understood there was a hospital case manager, but even though they were nice people, they were really of no help. What I really needed was what you guys do. Who should call? When is the right time to call? How does this all begin for somebody?
Well, two ways. One, I tell people to call when they're doing their aging plan.
Uh-huh.
So here's what I want. I'm doing my estate planning, my healthcare surrogate, power of attorney, all that stuff. Uh-huh. When you're making that plan, come up with your plan, your ideas, right, and your desires and wants, and then call in a case manager and say, hey, this is what my plan is. Let's talk. Yeah. And then you can get the education. The other time to call is before an emergency, which is, very helpful. If somebody's having issues in their home and their children are far away, instead of calling them every day, Mom, take your pill, call a case manager and have a long-term solution to that.
So I actually have an answer to when not to call. We had a gentleman call just a couple of days ago, and he is in rehab for having fallen and broken his hip. And while he's in rehab, 3 days prior, now his wife has fallen, is in the hospital. And there's no improvements in the home. There's not a grab bar. There's not a ramp. There's no caregiver. So here he is on the telephone, and I was like, he doesn't know what he needs. You got to go back and get the entire story. Sort of a backstory. It does take some time, but that's the only way to know what they sincerely need. And he sincerely needed a case manager.
Exactly. And another time not to call, just to follow your lead there, is we get calls when families, we've spent, mom had $30,000, and for the last 2 years we've spent it doing this, and this. Well, money doesn't regenerate typically.
Right.
So once it's gone, it's gone. So when you're starting out, like we think we need help, get a case manager in there, let them do an assessment of the situation. And I have this list. I had to write it down because I always leave something out. But there's a list of things that a case manager will look at.
Yeah, please share.
It's mental health, physical health, whether you have advanced directives in place, loss of a spouse, if you've outlived your funds or you think you are because you're approaching that, what your finances are, where you live and where you might need to live if you have a transition, the family and friends that are available to help you, people bringing meals over can help you stay in your home longer.
Yeah.
And if you have, just aside, if you have somebody who can bring you meals and is able to bring you meals, then don't spend your precious resources on meals. Yeah. And having meals sent in, if you can have them done some other way, use those resources for grab bars and ramps and other safety measures. And there are unique items to people, whether you have pets, you're in a wheelchair, you're quadriplegic, there's unique things that are specific to individuals. And then, of course, there's the reality. We all want what we want. I want to live at home and die in bed in my sleep. Well, that's not going to happen to most of us. So you need to get a care manager when you start noticing changes. You start feeling the little slip here and there.
Yeah. Well, we mentioned the first corollary to our getting your ducks in a row kind of version of calling it an aging plan, but the first thing we said was don't try this on your own, get help. But the second thing that we talked about in the helping seniors world is we say don't be an ostrich, don't stick your head in the sand, because typically aging problems don't get better with time. In fact, they seem to go the other way. And so here's a question I want to pose to both of you. Do you have to be, because I understand that the difference between the case manager that they sent into my mom's hospital room is an employee at the hospital, and let's be honest, at the end of the day, what's her job is to successfully get my mom discharged from the hospital and on to whatever is next, not really to think about us as a family and what would maybe be the 100% best for us, but she's just got to make sure that the traffic flow through the hospital keeps moving. And I'm not saying that wrong about it, but I'm saying that's not somebody who's on our side 100%. You guys are on our side 100%. But the question is, so because of that, it's private pay, I think. And then do you have to be wealthy to afford that? Talk a little bit about, how that part of it all could work.
Well, it is private pay, but it's one of those things where save a penny and spend $1.
Yes, yes.
Kind of things. Because, like I said, we get calls because people are exasperated. Yeah. They've spent money, they've done things, and it hasn't helped. Yeah. Because they aren't spending it and doing things on the right things.
Yes.
There's all these different aspects that I just listed.
Yeah.
And they may be spending it on A, but they really should be spending it on D. And that assessment will draw that out. And that's what the care manager is really going to do. They're going to draw out the root causes, the root issues. And it is private pay, but you don't have to be a millionaire to do it. You can bring in a care manager for a few hours or for months.
Yeah.
They can show up weekly. They can show up daily. It just depends on the needs. And most people in the business are going to be conscious of that.
Absolutely. And it reminds me of one of our very, very good friends, Advocates for the Aging, and also Emerald Care. And I'm not sure if total long-term care has it, but Danica and myself, we have an hour-long referral that we'll talk with the client before we go into any kind of monetary situation. And as a care manager, it's also my responsibility to make sure that I'm the right company. If I'm probably one of the least expensive just because my overhead is nil, and I'm a one-man show. But if I don't have the extensiveness of total long-term care. I don't have the extensiveness of advocates for the aging. That their resources go wider than mine. I guess I would just have to say, that's part of the responsibility of the care manager is to, if you're not right for this situation, you got to be big enough to say, I'm not right for the situation.
Yeah,
you have to be a good steward of the resources of your client, because your job is there to maximize their benefits in the community. So you're going to be looking for ways to save them money, but there is a fee for that after like you said, there's usually a 30 to 60 minute, 90 minute interview process where you're sizing up the project. And you're right, if you're not the right fit, or we can't help you at this point, we're going to refer you to somewhere else that can help you because we're not the right.
Yeah, as you guys were explaining that, I was thinking about a great friend of the Helping Seniors organization. Her name is Jennifer Barton, and she has a company called Seniors Helping Seniors. And we've talked so often over the years that she understands they hire seniors to go in and do what they call companion care. But she says it's like the first rung of service before you get into something that may require more hands-on, more care, more things like that. And the point, and I've heard Jennifer and Joe talk about this, and we've talked about it many times on radio shows and TV shows, is that that's being wise with your resources to not overuse resources at a time. And to the point that what you're both talking about, when you do that initial assessment, the thought that comes in my head is it's like what you're doing is you're helping to understand the destination so that you can create the roadmap. Because imagine if we hopped in our car and just started driving and we didn't really know where we're going. We'd never know if we were approaching our destination, and we're probably taking all sorts of wrong turns that's costing money, time, and everything. And I think that's what you guys are really talking about when you bring in a care manager, is you're going to help them pinpoint the destination, like what's the outcome, and then what are the best routes that will get us there? Am I saying that right?
Yes, and like you said, Jennifer refers. Yeah, you start out with the least restrictive, least expensive, and then you augment the care that the person needs. So you may get a call and somebody, you start out with home care and then home health and rehab, nursing home, assisted living. There's a list that as the care progresses, there's a continuum of care where things increase over time. And you want to start at the right place.
Right.
So you don't want to start with too little care, but you don't want to start with too much care. And that's usually what we see is somebody got too much care or too little care. And so it didn't help the big picture. It's
like a Goldilocks story, right? Because you need to have not too much or too little or too hot or too cold. You've got to get the right. You've got to match it for wherever that person is. Am I saying that?
Yes, and the individual is going to determine that. Yeah. So somebody may need their finances, help with their finances. Mm-hmm. Another person may not, but they may need help cooking a meal and doing laundry. It just depends. There's a big, long list of things that we do every day that allows us to function safely and prosperously. Yeah. Taking your medications, doing your exercises, driving to the store. There's a bunch of things that get done. And so the care manager comes in and says, where is the real need? Yeah. And how can we put somebody here to help them or help them find the right person that can fit all these needs? Because most care managers aren't the hands-on individuals. Right. They're the facilitator.
Yeah.
So we're going to help facilitate what you need in those little holes that you have, and everybody's puzzle has different holes.
Yeah, of course. Well, but I hear two words that kind of bubble up as we're having this conversation. One is you're concerned about safe outcomes for the people, right? Making sure it's safe. But there's also another aspect I heard, which is really quality of life. Talk about how those are part of what the care manager tries to help with.
Yes, the quality of life is, to me, the most important, but it isn't the most important to everybody.
Right.
But quality of life is a factor for everybody. That's one of the things that we talk about in the advanced directives. You know, in your aging plan, quality of life, where does it fit in your world? Because most people have a different perspective on that, which is odd, but it's true. People focus on different things to make their life have quality. I want to be there. I had a guardianship case where the woman wanted to be there for her horse. She had a pet horse. Everything else in her life didn't matter to her. Her quality of life depended on taking care of her horse. And other people, it would be driving. Or it could be living at home. Or I was an accountant or a finance person. I want to be able to do my bills.
Sure.
You can do my laundry and cook. I don't care.
But
you might have a chef who wants to cook because that's what they like to do. So quality of life is different for everybody.
Sure.
And it may or may not have a medical component. It's a mental health component.
Sure.
As well. And sometimes that's the bigger factor.
Let's talk a little bit. Go ahead, Karen.
I did want to add one thing as a care manager coming into a client at first, one of the very first things over and above getting to know each other is the medication list. I'm I'm so lucky in this world. I'm 71 years old and I am not on one medication.
Wow.
So I'm an oddball. I'm the odd man. I'm a Karen. What can I say? But so when I go into a client's home and invariably they have a pile of drugs they know nothing about and a pile of drugs that they think they're supposed to take and a pile of drugs that I don't even know. They're 5 years old. And you have to sit there and go, do you have any chart from your doctor saying what you're supposed to be on? Well, now you're into so many doctors. There's not just one doctor. So actually, medications is it's difficult. You don't have to be a pharmacist to figure it out. You just have to write every individual one down and find every doctor and find out what doctor goes with what medication. So it's sort of like, what's that old concentration game? You lift up your card and then the other one. And this is extreme because people drugs are so expensive that it's so hard for them to go from one drug to the next drug. They don't even know and it kills their insurance in a heartbeat.
Definitely. And when you have an incident and you go into a hospital, they don't have every drug in a hospital, which may sound weird, but you may have a blood pressure pill and they have an equivalent one.
Right.
So they give you a different pill and then you go to rehab and they switch it because they have a different one that they use. And so when you go back home, the meds you were on in the hospital or rehab don't match the meds you were on at home. But they do the same thing, so which is the right one? Then you have all this medication management and confusion, and people end up on multiple medications for the same reason, and it gets complicated fast.
Oh, we've had that conversation so often.
That's a whole call.
In the helping seniors world, because there's a lady who's a pharmacist, and she's retired from working in the pharmacy directly, but that's her mission. Her name is Dr. Cressida, and she is so intent on this whole thing about making sure seniors get their prescriptions managed correctly, because you go to different doctors for different things. These are the areas that a care manager can work with. But Corina, I want to make sure people know how to reach you and Total Long-Term Care Consultants if they have questions, want to continue the conversation, maybe talk to you about a care plan or things like that. How do they reach you?
We have a website. It's tlcconsultantservices.com.
Okay.
And the phone number is 321-752-0995.
Okay, say the phone number one more time. Corina Savela with Total Long-Term Care Consultants.
321-752-0995.
Okay, and Karen Wernlund from Emerald Care Management and also all the Helping Seniors stuff. But what is a good way to reach you?
Well, a good way to reach me is 321-622-8030, and also come to Eastminster Church.
Yeah, and I want to make sure that you also know, because that's kind of an overarching part of this, you can always call the Helping Seniors information line, 321-473-7770, and we can get you connected to Karen or to Corina or to any great resources that you may need. That's what we exist as a nonprofit. We have no other reason to exist than other to connect, inform, and get people to solutions for whatever situation they're facing on their aging journey. I just want to take a minute because we're in November and it's Thanksgiving month. So normally we do a program on the fourth Thursday of each month. 10 o'clock, we do a program called Knowledge College for Aging. 11 o'clock, we do a program called the Helping Seniors Wellness Series. And most people just make the morning out of it, come out, spend some time. It's good information, friendly people, lots of good resources, lots of providers there with answers for you, and there's always snacks, fun, even door prizes, Karen, because you put that whole thing together. But we wanted to make sure that you got the date update because we didn't want to conflict with the Thanksgiving weekend and all of that. In fact, Thanksgiving is usually a Thursday, in fact. So we decided we're going to have it on the second for just this month, and it's actually going to be the same next month. It's going to be the second Thursday. So this time out, we're going to see you on the 14th at Joe's Senior Resource Center. And we have just like a minute left. Karen, talk about what a fun morning out that really ends up being.
Those are a couple of good speakers coming up. We have at the Knowledge College, we have Attorney Ruth Rhodes going to attend to our aging plan. And then I believe our second speaker at the Wellness Series is going to be Dr. Kevin Kilday.
Yes.
And we haven't had him as a speaker yet, so I'm truly looking forward to that and having him over and share his knowledge about faith.
Faith College of Natural Health. You know, this is going to be fun because this is an online school. They've just gotten launched, but he comes from all of his background of Holistic Health Center and all of his training with addiction recovery, cancer protocols, and pain management, all holistically done. And I think that's all part of what he's going to be sharing with us. So between hearing from board-certified elder law attorney Ruth Rhodes on that aspect of your aging plan, the Knowledge College for Aging, these are free classes. It's just fun. Come on out and join us. They're held right there at Joe's Senior Resource Center, and it's just a fun morning out. So it's going to be 10 a.m. to 12 noon on Thursday. This time it's going to be on the 14th of November because we didn't want to get into the holiday. So that's about the time that we have. I want to thank Corina Savela with Total Long-Term Care Consultants and Karen Wernlund with Emerald Care Management and Helping Seniors for sharing all this good information so that we can get the care management that we need. So that's what we got for today. We'll see you next week right back here on 90.3 FM WEJF. Have a great week till then.